What do you like? Is it?
No, that's fine. All right, let's kick this thing off. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Wicked Energy with JG. I'm here with two of my good friends, Ian and Keith Myers, former oil and gas executives turned negotiation experts and recent founders of Mainline Ventures. Gents, welcome to the show. Ian, I'm going to start with you because you're way up north, but I'm assuming it's still hot up there. Where are you joining from today, man? You're up in Denver, right?
Yeah, I'm in Denver. Been here 10 years. It's actually a little cooler today than normal. It has been hot, but I did my stint in Houston for 3 years out of college, so I paid my dues and migrated north.
I hear you, man. And I kind of joke, but Keith Myers, I call him Keith Stone Pipeline. He's got to throw out some good nicknames. But Keith, you're actually here in the Houston in the Heights, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. I actually moved back almost 2 years ago, come October. Couldn't get enough.
Nice. Nice. So I got to ask you, Keith. I mean, we've had to pay our dues on the air conditioning expenses. Is that the case with you this summer too, or have you lucked out? Like, because I don't think.
No, I paid my dues for sure. I had a little escape. We went, took the kids and went to visit my family in Denver, and then back to PA, where back to see the roots. So we got out of the heat for a few weeks, but yeah, for the most part, I've been suffering right along with you.
That's yeah, man. I used to like our house around 73, 74. And now during the day, we turn up to 78 and sometimes 80 just because our house can't keep up, man. It's insane. Yeah, no, we've got fans blowing and all the rest of it. But no, it's been a good summer. I'm gonna come out and address the elephant in the room right here. Obviously, for the listeners, you heard their last names, and yes, they're brothers. So I gotta ask, like, what's it like being in business with your brother, and what's the magic sauce to make it work? Because this is not your first venture together. Like, you guys have worked alongside each other, and so I'll open it up, man. Like, is it like as good or as bad as you hear? Like, tell us a little about that.
I'll start, Keith. I'll give my 2 cents.
Reaction.
I think it's been great. I mean, honestly, it's what I look for in the job the most now, is what gives me an opportunity to grow something with my brother. So Justin's right. When I started Clear Creek Resource Partners back in 17, Keith and I both studied petroleum engineering. And, when you do a startup, believe it or not a lot of people understand the equity prize, which we ultimately didn't realize. But it's hard to recruit good talent. And so you need to recruit people you trust. And of course, first person I call is my younger brother, who was at ConocoPhillips. And really there we learned, I don't think it was before then, but then we learned, oh, like we can really work well together. We're kind of clones of one another. So he's normally thinking what I'm thinking, or we can kind of, double our efforts, and grew it there. And then, basically been trying to think, of ways to continue work together. So work together at a boutique consulting firm, now getting going on Mainline. So, I think in a lot of ways it requires good discipline to say, like, here are the boundaries, and we keep work and we keep family. But it's also nice to pick up the phone and I can be 100% honest and truthful to Keith, and he could be it back. So in some ways it's nice when you just have that much transparency. Keith, I don't know what else you have to add there, but
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Ian. I mean, making the biggest thing for me, making the transition from Fortune 500, Ian at Exxon, me at Conoco, to small private, and then even in our latest stint with another small private, the biggest challenge that you have is quality people, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Ian and I don't have the learning curve. We have boundaries, but I feel comfortable calling him at 2 a.m. as it's me, and we know we're gonna pick up the slack if the other can't do it for whatever reason. And having that kind of implicit understanding of one another and how we operate, I think has been nothing but a benefit to us in our careers. And I think that's what I value most of working together.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great, man. You hear, I mean, again, we don't have to get too deep into it, but just I can imagine, because a lot of families get torn apart, whether it be through like financials or just a bunch of drama. I don't have siblings, so it's hard for me to relate. I have kids now, and their siblings now in my immediate family, so I get to see the dynamic between a brother and a sister. But no, I commend you guys. I think it's super fascinating. And so, and you may have differing opinions on this, but who gets to delegate the tasks, and who ultimately Like, does someone have veto over someone else, maybe younger or older? I mean, how do you guys figure that out, man?
I think we both have a tremendous amount of respect for one another, and I think it ebbs and it flows. Like there are times where, maybe I'm running the show more. In a Clear Creek, technically, I was there first, and so maybe it was a little more of that then. But I mean, I think we have a lot of respect for one another, and so when I know Keith calls and says, "Hey, I need you to do this," and it might be some menial thing, like I hop on it, and I think vice versa. And I think it just as long as you approach it from, I think we consider ourselves equals, and I think as long as you approach it from a place of mutual respect, there's never any issues. Because I know the thing about us, and I think it just comes from where we grew up in Pennsylvania, is like no task is beneath us. Like if I call Keith and ask him like, hey, can you go, set the bank account up for the company today, which he might view as beneath him, like he knows I would do it too. And so I think it ebbs and it flows, and I think having that respect allows it to do so.
Yeah, that makes sense. Keith, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what Ian said. I mean, initially, right, I was still a junior engineer when I started at Clear Creek for the most part. I think since that time, I've gained a lot of skill sets, MBA, a lot of exposure to different elements, different things that have kind of leveled that skill set. And I would say within the past 2 years, we've kind of been on that even playing field. I honestly, it's a benefit to me that I got that exposure early on that kind of brought me to where I feel like, Ian and I are equals, and I owe Ian for that. But yeah, I mean, it's like he said, nothing's too menial or too big for us. We'll pass things along to each other as necessary. It works
Yeah.
pretty well.
No, it makes sense. It's again, I was just I've heard horror stories, and so it's again, I commend you guys. I would imagine it takes a lot of humility and just communication, just like any relationship, right? But no, I just thought
I do think Justin, like I do think you draw the line at brothers. Like I do not. We've had opportunities to work with their dad, and we've kind of define that hard line. And I think with a partner, I know a lot of people can do it with their significant other. I probably wouldn't go down that route, just having done it with Keith. But hey, some people make it work. So I will say for us, it's at the brother line.
Okay, so
hard line.
So it's been pretty much mutual agreements on all fronts here. So if you guys were to step in the ring toe to toe, who would win?
Got me on a bad.
I would. I'd wear him. I mean, he's strong. Keith is like, he just has natural strength. I'm wearing down. I'd get him tired, and then I
got that lower center of gravity. I'm a little bit taller. So.
But wait, didn't you wrestle? Or because
a little bit. But Keith is the kid that, Justin, you could relate to this, that would frustrate you and I, because we'd be at the gym 5 days a week. Keith would come in, I haven't worked out in 3 weeks, and throw on, 3 plates on a bench and just start like cranking it out. Like that's how he's always been. So he's got that raw, natural strength that is tough to deal with.
Man, kids like me could only dream of that.
I know.
That's great. Well, let's get into the nuts and bolts here. Just you guys, and I'm gonna kind of do this because so you guys, originally from Pennsylvania, get your petroleum engineering, do real well in oil and gas. But then can you sort of describe the origin story of the consulting company and how, or like what inspired you to focus on that? Because I've been in oil and gas my entire career since the age of 18. You guys straight out of college, same thing, did petroleum engineering at Penn State. It's a unique path, but one that I think opens up a lot of opportunity for us as an industry, but also for individuals like myself that are coming up, will in the, mid to upper management, eventually into executive level. So again, going back to the questions, like what's the origin story and what really inspired you guys to go down this route?
Yeah, why don't I talk about the origin story, Keith, and you could talk about like our inspiration around it. But really, when COVID happened, Justin, we were both at Clear Creek, and the writing was pretty clear on the wall of what was going to happen with Clear Creek when oil prices tanked. And Keith and I had, our dream was always to start an oil and gas company. And we were really, really lucky to do that relatively early. I think I was 27 when we started that. I mean, Keith, you joined, when you were 25, 20.
Yeah.
So, you take a step back when COVID happens and you say, okay, I'm young, I still got a lot to give. What do I want to go do? We always wanted to get our MBA. We just were cranking along in our careers, and didn't feel like there was a good departure point. So I initiated that, went back to Northwestern Kellogg School of Business. And then basically halfway through that program, and the whole intent was, I want to go do something different. I have no idea what it is. I'm going to go use the MBA as leverage to do it. Clear Creek kind of wraps up halfway through that program. And I'm kind of like, I don't know exactly what I want to do. Got a unique opportunity from a professor there who runs a boutique consulting firm and is a world-renowned negotiation expert, consults on this stuff all day long. Wanted someone more senior to come in, help the team, and kind of had this opportunity. And, I think the thing about oil and gas, at least with what I saw at Clear Creek and other places, is, your negotiations are really what, kind of set the track for, are you going to have a good outcome or not? Now, commodity prices matter too, but what do you negotiate your asset purchase for? What do you negotiate your midstream agreement around? And what do you negotiate your procurement, contracts around, so you keep cost at a level that's going to allow you to make return? And no one, at least I was around, really was schooled in this. And so I thought, hey, I want to go see a bunch of different industries and get really good at this. Jumped on there. And then Keith kind of followed that journey. He went to Cal Berkeley to get his MBA, and I kind of pulled him into this company as quick as I could. And so that was kind of like how we got here. And then Keith, you can walk us through kind of why mainline, why now?
Yeah, so I mean, my journey's been a little bit different than Ian's. Yes, I started out on the operator side, but I also served on the service end as well. So I've kind of seen both sides of the table. I always felt like it was completely unfairly weighted in the oil and gas industry. That was validated when I got exposure to all other industries, right? And so, coming in, I had the same goals as Ian. With everything that happened at Clear Creek, I wanted to be a little more direct control of my outcomes. And I felt like this would be a good opportunity to kind of build your own destiny, so to speak, and not have outside factors be as heavy of an influence as they are directly in the oil and gas world. And so, yeah, I mean, starting in, we're getting reps, we're getting exposure to other industries. We're seeing how their challenges are very similar to the challenges that you see in the oil and gas world. And the reality is, there's a systematic approach that you can take with every negotiation, be it sales, be it procurement, be it M&A, be it employment, right? And it is fairly natural process, but so often teams fail to realize and capture the value of subtle behavioral changes that weigh into negotiation process, and different strategies and approaches. And me, I immediately saw kind of the end prize, right? When I joined, I was like, okay, this is a problem that I've experienced firsthand in oil and gas. As an operator, I commoditize vendors because that's what you're taught to do, right? And as on the service side, I was forced to differentiate myself and try and optimize agreements that way. But there's no formal training when it comes to negotiation in oil and gas, certainly not as much as there are in other industries, right? And so early on, I saw the opportunity. I wanted to study, get the tenure, get the pedigree, get the reps under my belt. But this was always kind of the end game, the jumping point of mainline ventures whenever I decided to initially join the firm.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And again, someone like myself who's been on the service side my entire career, I've built strong relationships with people on the operator side. And it's so interesting to hear their perspective going from the operator, and then whether it's by choice or not, going to the service side to get a glimpse of what it's like being on the other side. And I think a lot of people, once they do it, it's kind of eye-opening, and then they realize, oh, okay, this is what we really are dealing with. And so it allows them to, if they go back to the operator side, have a little bit of a different perspective. But I would say, like, what operators do very well is the level of training they provide to, whether it be procurement, to engineers. And again, going through engineering school, there's some things taught that, folks on the service side that just don't get exposed to, because a lot of them come from the field, they move up into operations, technical support, sales, and then maybe they get into to the upper management field, but they don't, a lot of it is just that school of hard knocks. But, there's always that sort of debate around, formal education, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. But I think the reality is there's certain skills that are taught and that are gained going, whether it's to getting your MBA or going to college, or getting formal training from a consulting company where you're actually spending a considerable amount of money, but the tools and the skills that you're learning you can use forever in your career that can give you such an advantage. But would you say again, for both of you, because you've worked on like with large oil and gas companies down to the smaller size, do you think if service folks had proper training and just more training in sort of negotiations, would it level the playing field? And like, what kind of outcome would you expect for an oil field service company to have? Because like you said, most of the time the leverage is held in the hands of the operators. Now, after the pandemic, I think it helped level the playing field a little bit, just because inflation was so crazy. And so service companies, like, they were the ones with the control and the equipment and the people. It was like, you're going to pay for what we have because you don't have any other choice. But all that being aside, talk a little bit about like how it helps level the playing field, but can actually benefit both operators and oil field service companies.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that one. So the problem generally with a lot of service and sales groups is that they're kind of egocentric in the way that they present information and the way that they present the value add to the operator. So, when I was sitting on that side of the table, I would have, a new vendor come in and tell me how amazing their product is at something that is completely irrelevant to me, or maybe doesn't really move the needle at all to me, right? It's taking time to understand, how does my operation set up? What is important to me? What is my program looking like right now? And crafting a value offering around that incorporates my needs, right? And when you do that, and we call it digging around the edges, right? So you have the main issue, the contentious issue is always going to be price, right? Price, availability. But there are other issues that are important to an operator. Proximity to the field, right? Reliable team, technical expertise. These things a lot of service companies have, but if you're not actively discussing it and you're not baking that into the offer in some form or fashion, i.e. site visits, i.e., in-house service, those things dissolve, right? They aren't realized in the negotiation process, and me as an operator and forgetting about that, right? And so I'm strategically commoditizing you relative to everybody else because you're not highlighting the fact that you have more technical expertise, right, throughout the offer, or that you have better proximity or better certainty of supply or whatever it may be. And so as an operator, we're trained to do that, right? We're trained to commoditize. We're trained to boil you down and make you feel like you deserve whatever it is we're willing to offer you. But there are ways to combat that, and that is what we're trying to do here with Mainline Ventures.
No, that's huge.
Thing I'll add, Justin, is one of the things, I hear you talk about cost and inflation. I think those things are important. I think one thing we work with all of our clients on to understand is, when we're thinking about our cost, we're thinking about our bottom line, of what our reservation point is, what we're walking away from the negotiation doing. But when we're setting our goal of what we want to go ask for, we're thinking about the other side's BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated outcome. So what would they do if they don't use JG Consulting on a product? And so when you flip that, and we have a systematic way of evaluating that, but when you look at it through that angle and you start to really think, okay, say you're a mud company, this company had severe losses, really as a mud company, what you are is a drilling risk mitigation tool. I mean, you're ultimately a middle of the AFE line item, which is great. That's where you want to be because the top lines get the most scrutiny, but you're there to mitigate risk. And so look at it from that perspective. You're the only mud playing around. They have severe losses. That's clear their differentiation. They clearly don't have great alternatives in your technical team and all this and that. And so let's do a systematic and analytical analysis and set our goal based on that, rather than, coming in and saying, hey, our costs are higher, we need to pass that along. And I think that is another kind of key concept that I would consult any client, whether it's oil and field services, or we do tech stuff, a tech sales client. So yeah.
That's a really good point. And I live and breathe this world day in and day out. And so I understand what you're saying. And a lot of times the challenge for us on the oil field service side is a lot of the information that you're providing is to an engineer who likes to validate things through quantity, or they want sort of like, how can you qualify that? Like, oh, we're gonna mitigate your risk. We have the best technical team. And so then it's up to the service company to go one step further to somehow qualify that. Because I find that a lot of times, and it was always like, oh, why should we use you? And a lot of oil field service companies are like, well, we just have the best people and the best service. Like, you just have to trust us. It's like, hey, well, like, prove it. Like, where's the data, right? And so, without getting into the weeds, like, are there ways to do that, or is it more just better messaging and better storytelling, or a bit of like a combination of both?
The simplest way to do that is to bet on it, right? To make a contingency offer that's based on performance that you'll drive and outcomes you'll drive.
Yeah.
It gets a little hairy if you do that, and there's a systematic approach to doing it, and setting a price point such that if you don't want them to go that route, you don't have to, but the signal is made, right? We know our quality is superior. We know we have certainty of supply, whatever it is, and we're willing to bet on that. And that bet does a lot. I mean, it qualifies you and signals confidence. And so that's most commonly what we advise our clients to do in that situation.
Yeah. It sounds simple, Justin, but that really, I mean, I always talk to oil field service companies about this, right? Because if something goes wrong on the job, right? I think oil field service companies make this asymmetrical bet all day long. And what I mean by that is, if something goes wrong, what's the first thing that happens? An engineer calls you in, is going to beat you down on the ticket. You're going to make some concession, but so you have this downside risk of performance, but you have no upside if things go perfectly based on that. So build something into the offer. And Keith's right. Like, sometimes what we'll do is we'll just put that in the offer and price it so high that we know they're probably not going to take that offer. If they do take that offer, we're over the moon. But just even having it in an offer is going to stand out so much more compared to all the other operators. And it's, hey, don't even worry about us proving the data. We'll provide the data, but we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. And I think that's really powerful.
No, it is, man. It's again, it's so relatable. And I really find that concept fascinating. Is like, if there's a well issue, they come, they beat us down, we end up giving them a credit because with the fear of losing the work. And so it's like, we'd rather take a quick loss and a punch to the mouth, but keep the work than say no. But then on the flip side, if things are going well, the only upside opportunity for us is we get to keep the work. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, well, what do you mean you want something because you've been performing? You're on the job, you're making money. So if you don't like it, we've got 10 other companies at our door every single day. And so again, it's like, these are things I'm sure people listening that are in my shoes on the oil field service side are like, yeah, but, which again is highlighting the point. Like, there's ways around this stuff, which I just can't stress enough about why I think this is so cool of what you guys are doing, because you have an answer to all these questions. And, again, I just think it's fascinating. But I want to pivot just a little bit, and I want to give a little bit sort of from like tactical value right out of the gate here by giving, like, what are your three, and this doesn't have to necessarily be for oil field services, just in general, what are the top 3 or top negotiation tactics that people can implement that don't have to all of a sudden reach out and go through like a full-blown consulting program? But like, what are 3 things people should be thinking about that can kind of help slightly change the trajectory? Is there anything sort of low-hanging fruit that you guys have come across through your experience?
But why don't I kick it off with the first one, Keith? I think my favorite tool, and Justin, this can be used in negotiation. It can be used in influence. It could be, kids are a little bit tricky, but you can use this in influence with your partner or your family or whatever. Is when we want, and this all comes from prospect theory, it's all rooted in very deep psychological research. when we want someone to change or move off the status quo, we want to talk loss. We want to use loss framing when we have that discussion, when we paint that story, when we deliver the message. And so if I'm trying to get into a new operator, I want to talk about the risks, the vulnerability, the exposure, the competitive threat that they face by not using me, and paint that story, right? And what Keith and I are experts at is finding that story, but at the end of the day, using that really, really helps. Now, if I want to maintain status quo, I want to talk gain frame, value proposition. You know, I want to talk about the everything I'm adding to the organization. And so I think that's a very simple tool that you can use. I mean, I used it when I negotiated, you know, my car, or I used it when I negotiated salary for sure. I mean, you can use it in everything. I think that's a very top of mind tool for me.
Wow. Okay. Keith,
All
you
right.
got anything?
I would say deploying a multiple offer is probably one of the simplest and most critical tools that I'd recommend using. It is what it sounds like, right? You, instead of giving the operator one offer and saying, hey, this is what we can do, you bake in 3 different offers that are all of equal value to you in some capacity, right? But you're varying certain elements within those offers, be it price, be it level of service, be it whatever. And in doing that, you're changing the conversation a little bit, right? It's not if we'll use you, it's how will you use us, right? And you know, I did it to you for this podcast, right? Where I give you 3 options of when we can meet together. It's not if we meet, it's when we meet.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, you're gaining a lot of things, right? It allows you to kind of start the conversation, set the anchor. You can set it high, you can seed on price or whatever. You're maintaining a relationship enhancing by showing, look, I heard you. Here's what we can do for you now, right? In addition to that, you're also understanding relative preference, right? So you might not know exactly what the operator wants out of you or what they find valuable and what your offering is. And so by giving 3 different options that have different elements, you'll see which one they lean toward. And that gives you information on what's important to them. And I think that's critical as well.
No, the option piece is interesting. I've seen that on like some sales strategy type stuff, but which again, I think sales and negotiation are hand in hand to some degree. But no, I mean, again, those are 2. I mean, they seem obvious, but when you actually apply them in the systematic approach, clearly the outcome is weighed hopefully a little bit more towards the one who has, you know, again, whether it be the oilfield service company or the person trying to negotiate. So for you guys at Mainline Ventures, I mean, how would you then, because every company's so much slightly different, right? Or I say so much different in the way that whether their business cycle or their sales cycles are, again, you said you worked like with some tech companies. So like, how do you customize your training sessions for different clients or even just like company cultures? How do you navigate that, or how would you?
I think everything we do is customized, Justin. So, you know, obviously we're going to pull it's oil field services, and that's really what we're focusing on here off the bat. Keith and I have just a deep expertise and knowledge of that buyer's, you know, structure and how they think about things and how the process is, and you know, how do we overcome procurement? How do we overcome all these things? But more importantly, you know, we're going to be meeting, and really we pride ourselves in meeting our clients where they're at, understanding their process, almost doing like an audit, like, hey, show us what you're doing right now and let us dive in. And then more importantly, and I think what ultimately helps us create value is, you know, working with them, applying the principles and applying the concepts on something that's active. So Justin, bring me your top 10, you know, sales objectives of the year. Let's work and create, you know, create content and reinforcement around these 10, how we apply the concepts to these 10. And that way it's something that, you know, is very salient for you because it relates to something you are doing. We're using your lexicon, we're using your language, we're using your company culture, and we're basically building these things around examples that are live with each of the companies. Keith, I don't know what else you want to add to that.
To I guess boil it down really simply, issues are the same regardless of industry, right? Every industry has trouble differentiating themselves. Every industry has trouble not talking about themselves and focusing on the other side, right? There's a little bit of nuance on the type of service provided, but at the end of the day, everybody's looking for footprint expansion, or they're looking to move up in the C-suite, or they're looking to just raise the tide of their outcomes, right? Or increase conversion rate and win rate. And there are
Right.
processes that are repeatable for all of that, right? And the nomenclature may change slightly, and the situation and interaction may change slightly. But I would say, we've had a few hundred reps at this now, all across industries, tech, CPG, banking, right?
Oh,
Professional service firms, and the issues are the same regardless of the industry.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We actually in our company had some sales training come, this was before the pandemic, but we initially they had reached out, and the one, like, neither one of them had oil and gas experience, and we kind of took a gamble on them. They had a good reputation. And it became clear that at the end of the day, it's all psychology, and all you have to do is slightly tweak the language and the jargon. But at the end of the day, the programming and the system and sort of the steps to take to get there are very similar in a sense. It's kind of once you build the foundation of how you, I guess, go about these programs, or these tactics, or whatever you. And I don't even like to use the word tactic. That seems kind of, I don't know. Anyway, but again, the point I'm trying to make is, like, I think you had to customize it for the company culture, probably more so than like what widget you're trying to sell, or what service are you having, or you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, like Ian, you referenced earlier, is like something about the psychology behind it. And I mean, oil and gas especially is such a people's business. A lot of decisions are not data-driven decisions. They're buying off of emotion and relationships, and then justifying it afterwards somehow through whatever means that they have. But so again, I think it's important to note is like who you're, maybe the audience, depending if you're talking like to executive level, or you're maybe talking to procurement management, or you're talking to a bunch of like street hustlers who are doing most of their work on the ground. Because again, the audience is going to change, but I would imagine that the systems and all that are fairly similar. I'm
one
curious.
thing,
Yeah,
one
go
thing
ahead.
I just want to add, because you got it in my mind, I think is important to just kind of call out, is because we know what's important in the oil and gas space is relationships, like you said, and everything around our concepts and our ideas and our framework is around, everything's relationship enhancing. So we're taking tactics that not only are going to get you better outcomes, but they're going to elevate and enhance the relationship. Like, we're thinking about it through that frame. That's different than I think when a lot of people think about negotiations. Like, if you came to me for a car negotiation, that's what we call more of a single shot negotiation, meaning you deal with them one time, you don't deal with them ever again. Relationship is not as important. We would have different tactics for that, right? And we give you totally different instructions. So I do think we understand very very clearly the importance of relationships. And so everything we're building in, and everything we're teaching, and everything we're aiming for is not only to get you the best outcomes, but also to enhance the relationship and escalate that relationship. So you don't only have one with the engineer, you have one with the VP, and eventually the CEO. And so you're just ingraining yourself even more into the company. So just something I wanted to add there, because I think we understand that importance for sure within oil and gas.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point. So kind of from a personal experience, and again, you don't have to name names or companies, but like, can you share any memorable negotiation scenarios where the stuff that you're talking about actually created value? Like, what's something tangible that you can kind of share as like, look, this shit really works, and here's an example.
Yeah, I'll talk about one I just kind of finished up. So this is a healthcare, so completely unrelated industry. There was some rule changes that took effect that helped our client, basically gave them an advantage in renegotiation efforts with some major clients of theirs. And they didn't quite know what to do with it. They just knew it existed, right? And so we came in, I helped them build that loss framing concept that Ian had mentioned before. We went to 50, build a systematic approach, standardize basically an offer deck, and a playbook and talk track, right? With objections, what you're going to see, what you're going to hear, and led the renegotiation effort with 50 plus interactions, and that ultimately drove $70 million of annual value for the
Wow.
client. Yeah,
Dang,
and
that's huge.
I will add a big part of it is they had their initial ideas of what their goals should be in the renegotiation effort. And I helped them kind of reset that target, 20, 25% above what they're initially thinking, and explain to them why that is. And it goes back to BATNO, like Ian mentioned earlier. And I think that made a huge difference in their minds. And you saw over time kind of that mind shift once they started seeing the success of the effort and the approach. And by the end of it, I didn't really need to do anything anymore because they were seeing success. The prior precedent was set, and the flywheel was turning. And I would say that was probably one of my biggest recent accomplishments.
Nice. Ian, you got any juicy ones that you've been a part of?
I mean, I've done personal negotiation ones where we've taken, top salespeople and doubled their salary, done big Fortune 500, like multi-global, multi-party global negotiations, which had, significant value. I think the one that kind of comes to mind that might not sound as impressive, but I'm really proud of is it was a data provider, as a European data provider. Their client called and said, if you don't cut the contract in half by 30 days, we're canceling, called freaking out. And we're able to not only, combat that through, through loss framing, through understanding the pressing needs of the other side and kind of expanding the conversation. So we not only combated that, but actually got them an increase in their contract value. And so that's just one that, and this happens a lot. People call you freaking out. Hey, they're going to cancel this contract if I don't do something. If I don't cut price in half, everyone's ready to cut price in half, and then we go and help them not only keep their price but increase it. And so, that's the one
Nice.
that I think, I'm probably most proud of.
That's again, that's so cool. And I think especially when you're dealing with a customer who calls you and says, do this or else, the automatic response is, how much money are we willing to lose to keep this work? Which is the shittiest way to look at it. And it's, I mean, again, I don't want to just completely shit on operators all the time, but the reality is like they've done a good job, and I blame service companies for just not implementing training and putting enough effort and resources into like combating a lot of this. And so again, it's no fault to anybody's, but the reality is there's just so much opportunity out there for, and it doesn't even have to be oil and gas, just any companies to understand these sort of strategies, to create, to just do better as businesses, and of course on the financial health side of it, but just the confidence piece. I think for people, like for myself, even just the small conversations I've had with you guys over the last couple of weeks about it, it's like I've written probably, more notes down than I have talking to a lot of different people. It's like, oh, I need to think of that and I need to look into that. So again, not to toot your guys' horn anymore, but it just, I've lived in this space for so long without any sort of idea on how to go about this. And I've read negotiation books and stuff like that, but a lot of it is just hype material. And again, I've been able to take bits and pieces, but no, I think I admire what you guys are doing, coming at it, especially with the experience you guys have. Being that we're coming up close to the hour here, I do want to respect your time and the listeners as well. What's the best way to reach out? Whether it be LinkedIn. I mean, you guys don't have to spell it all out, but let us know how folks can get a hold of you guys, and if there's anything else that you want to share to the audience.
Yeah, let me share one more thing based on your last comment there, Justin.
Yeah.
Negotiation books, right? They're great. But the reality is you're going to read it, you're going to say, hey, that's really cool. And you're probably never going to apply it. I think why Ian and I have had success is because we know how to implement these. So we know the science, but we also know the implementation. And we'll work with your team on the implementation component. And that's the hardest component to drive. And it's the same with most of the academics, but we're not academics. We have practical business experience. And so I just wanted to hit on that, I think that's where the biggest gap right now is on the implementation side, and that's our main focal point from a negotiation standpoint. Ian, I'll let you give a little note on how to reach us.
Yeah, I think the easiest way, Justin, is just on our website, mainline-ventures.com is the easiest. You can find Keith or me on LinkedIn. You can find Mainline Ventures on LinkedIn as well. And
Perfect.
so those are the easiest ways to get in touch with us.
Awesome, fellas. Well, no, I'll make sure and put the link in the show notes. And for the listeners out there, even if you have any a question or whatever, encourage you to reach out. I'm sure they'd love to give you a few minutes of their time. And with that being said, everyone, please share, subscribe. And again, I think this is huge for those out there. So please share this with a friend, a colleague, your boss, whoever. And again, for everyone out there, always remember that everyone deserves access to energy, and we is greater than me. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Justin.